We'd like to thank our podcast sponsors for supporting our programs. Here's a quick message. Long-term care pharmacies are always on the hunt for ways to scale their business and ensure they're a solutions partner for their nursing home and skilled facility customers. Now, with the aging baby boomer generation projected to increase the number of Americans ages 65 and older from 46 million to more than 95 million by 2060, the demand for long-term care has never been greater, and neither have the growth opportunities for LTC pharmacies. Framework LTC is a long-term care pharmacy software designed to improve scalability. This platform is incredibly effective for scaling your LTC pharmacy business. It starts with your workflow management, designed around your operations. Framework LTC was designed with long-term care intricacies in mind, which provide a number of different features unavailable with a retail pharmacy software. Framework LTC helps to accomplish these 7 critical categories: streamlined workflows, automated manual tasks, custom services to meet unique needs of different facilities, gain better visibility into your operations, make data-driven decisions, curb your billing complexities, and manage new services. Learn more at frameworkltc.com. That's frameworkltc.com.
You're listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, we are back for season 6 of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I'm your host, Marina Buksov, a functional medicine pharmacist and holistic herbal educator. I'll be sharing inspiring stories of my guests who have shifted into holistic modalities, both personally and professionally. My co-host, Dr. Jenna Carmichael, will be joining me to lead the Journal Club episodes to share an evidence-based approach to holistic and herbal medicine. I'm so glad you're here and hope you enjoy the show. Greetings, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying the spring holidays, breaks, and weather. It's looking beautiful here in New York. And today I'm interviewing the beautiful and brilliant Janan Sarwar, and we cover a variety of topics about how she went from pharmacy to publishing entrepreneur, as well as some basic health coaching that was instrumental in her health journey. Janan is a dynamic entrepreneur, pharmacist, publishing professional, and mother of 3 lovely girls in Louisville, Kentucky. She's the founder of the company Global Bookshelves International, an independent publishing house focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion in content and voices from around the world. Global Bookshelves International was inspired by her eldest daughter, Lena, and her children's storytelling podcast, Salam Storytime. Janan actively serves as a medical content writer, pharmacy career coach, and publisher. She's passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion, speaking, writing, and connecting with others on these topics. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have with me today an esteemed guest. Her name is Janan Sarwar, and she's a publisher, pharmacist, and mother. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Marina.
It's my absolute pleasure. I've been following your work, and I saw you recently at the Your Financial Pharmacist Summit. And I really enjoyed the talk that you had there, and everything that you shared, and your mission, really resonated. So I definitely wanted to have you on, and I would love to ask you this question that I ask all my guests, which is really, your journey from, your childhood, how you were brought up, and what made you choose pharmacy in the first place.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. It's an honor to be here and to share my story. I was born and raised in Tennessee. My parents are from Bangladesh, and I've enjoyed my life in the South. I've also lived in various locations like North Carolina, which is where I ended up going to pharmacy school at UNC. And I lived in DC area, and I currently live in Louisville, Kentucky. And my pharmacy career is quite non-traditional. As you mentioned, I'm a publisher and a pharmacist. I consider myself equally part of both, and of course, a mother as well. That happened about 7 years ago. My eldest daughter is 7. But the reason I chose pharmacy, like many others, I'm sure, and I've heard several amazing episodes of your show, wanting to help others, wanting to find a way to give back. Healthcare seemed like a great way to do it. And I have that influence from both of my parents. My mother is in Bangladesh, went to medical school. My father is an engineer. And so STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, that was really emphasized to me growing up. I'm guessing for many others and you as well, being a pharmacist. At the same time, I've always been passionate about the creative side of life. Arts, creating things, photography, those are some of my hobbies. Reading books, as you see behind me. The colorful ones are my daughter's books. The ones on the top, I'll tell you about in a moment, are the books that relate to my pharmacy career that I had for about 7 years. But specifically pharmacy to help others. And I also, during undergrad, I was actually pre-med and I was in biomedical engineering courses, trying to be doing that for my undergraduate degree. But one day I got really sick and I had to go to the student health services, and they had no idea what was wrong because I was getting this rash all over my arms. I had a really extremely high fever, and they sent me to the emergency room essentially to get taken care of. And my roommates called my parents. I went to undergrad at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. My parents came and actually took me home to go to Vanderbilt because that's closer to where my parents live. They still live in Tennessee. And it turns out that I nearly had basically kind of like an SJS, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, drug reaction to Bactrim. I was taking Bactrim for some non-existent dermatologic acne that I didn't really have, but
Wow.
my father and I both have a sulfa allergy, and something triggered it. I'd been taking the medication for a month, but something else triggered the drug reaction, and I was in the intensive care unit for a good 2 weeks, and I stepped down. It was pretty scary, honestly, and I remember thinking, not being able to really communicate, hearing things being said by the physicians, by people who were visiting. Wow, I really need to understand more about drugs and how they work and how they interact. So that really solidified my choice to go into pharmacy school. So that's what I chose. Getting into pharmacy, actually, I worked at a Walmart pharmacy through undergrad. Right after I came out and recovered from that episode, it was actually some steroids that helped take care of me, some corticosteroids that got me back to health so that I could become better. The interesting thing that happened is that I essentially learned that anytime I worked in the pharmacy setting, like in Walmart, my eyes would turn red. And I'm guessing no one really found out. I have not been in that kind of a setting for years, but it's perhaps because of the sulfa. And sulfa's in a lot of medications.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew what, even though I got into pharmacy school and I worked in pharmacy, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew it would be something non-traditional. And so that's the kind of start to my journey of why pharmacy. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more through your questions about more about my path, but I don't want to keep talking. I want to let you ask and we can chat.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everything you've shared thus far. And that's certainly fascinating. And I don't think enough people are aware that, such common, mundane things like an antibiotic that you think is actually one of the best drugs, right? Because you take it to get rid of an infection and it's self-limiting usually, like you take it for a limited amount of time. You don't have to be on it for a chronic disease usually. And so it's one thing that we like to use for different kind of bugs, right? And help our lives, right? And help our immune systems to fight things off. And nowadays, I feel like with Corona, everybody's more
Yeah.
aware of bugs and viruses and what's out there, and natural immunity versus like what can we do to support it versus like vaccines versus antibiotics and antivirals. So I feel sometimes that we're like back in the old ages now with all these bugs, because these were the diseases that plagued us in the past, but they're still around. And, our evolution with them and our immune systems, they do have to be exposed to it to some extent in order for us to fight it. So there's this delicate scale and balance. But what I wanted to say is that not everybody that I speak to, has this kind of story, this almost negative story, right, of a negative experience with a drug. And that's what actually made you pursue learning more about this, because I presumably wanted to avoid these kind of reactions in your patients.
Yes, yes. That's exactly right. And, I think you're absolutely spot on about, the thought of antimicrobial resistance and the next pandemic that could happen due to that, because of not just what we do here in America, but other countries or other people that don't have that knowledge of that balance that you were speaking about. It's so fascinating and also terrifying when you really think about it, because the world, just like we learned with coronavirus, you can't contain these things. So if there are issues and it's happening in different regions, we can't contain it. This can be a global thing. But anyway, we can keep it light and to say that you're right. It's very absolutely a reason why I thought pharmacy is interesting, but it also made me realize that I think, well, so, I mean, you're the holistic pharmacist, you're a holistic pharmacist, and we're speaking about this. I do believe I'm one of those pharmacists that love the concept of functional medicine and these concepts that everything that you're putting in may fix one thing, but it's altering another. So again, it's about balance, right? We need to be mindful of anything that we're consuming, anything we're exposing ourselves to, whether it's dermatological on the surface or you're actually taking it or you're exposing yourself. It all impacts us. So very important to really reflect and think about that as well.
Yeah. And something else that you pointed out was that you were on this medication for a month before there was a reaction.
Yes.
So there was that additional stressor or trigger that actually, created the disbalance. And so even though you're the person with an allergy, other factors influence, how this allergy presents. If you have other things going on or other things in your environment or other stressors or whatever it is, like there's just a multitude of factors besides just the input and the output.
Oh, yeah. You know what it was? I had an organic chemistry and biology test and some math test all in the same week.
Wow.
And that the drug reaction, like everything happened. That was the trigger. It was the stress. Yeah.
Yeah, in other words, stress. But yeah, I think it's just fascinating to understand that, wow, we have so much science and so much knowledge and, so much evidence-based modalities that inform our decisions in our medicine, but realizing that the human is still such a fragile being. And, these things that are either more esoteric, right? Like you can't really quantify the stress. And then also the things that we're actually putting into our system and our body are and the bugs that are still all around us and inside of us, they can really throw us off balance, which is really fascinating.
Yes, absolutely.
So I also wanted to comment about your books. I saw right away when we started this meeting that they were so beautifully arranged, and I've seen that kind of color pattern in the past. So that's really, really cool. I love that.
Thank you. This is my girl system. My daughters are 3, 5, and 7, and colors are how they recognize things. So they help keep it in order. It is kind of a little unorganized right now, but it gets it on the shelf. And we love to read. And that is what I do now primarily. Although I'm a pharmacist, my main passion and project is in publishing books for children, as well as books for young adults, older adults, related to healthcare, health equity, memoirs, all sorts of things. I have big dreams, and it's very fun to actually be able to live what I feel is my purpose and still feel that I'm a pharmacist. I use my meticulous organizational skills and knowledge of drugs when it comes to some of the healthcare books that I'm working on. So I'm also just here to say that for anyone listening, as you have done yourself in your own career, it's never too late to follow your passion, to follow your heart, and to find a way to integrate it and balance your life so that you are truly living your purpose. So,
yeah, I appreciate that, Janan. And as you know, this podcast is all about sharing inspirational and motivational and uplifting stories so that other pharmacists and other people in general just get some ideas and inspiration and get to follow some of our footsteps. So I would love to dive into your journey, as a pharmacist or studying to be a pharmacist, and how did you carve out this more non-traditional path for yourself to end up as this distinguished publisher that you were just mentioning? Like, what steps did you take right out of school? What connections did you make? And really, how did your initial experience with this drug allergy inform some of your choices, perhaps?
yeah, I wish I could tell you that everything was calculated and I had a plan. I look now and it is very calculated and it looked like I had a plan. So I love being able to share this in my life journey. And I will share it in the best way possible. But I will say, to start the story, none of anything I did would have been possible without the support of people that were mentors in my life. So I had mentors, I had coaches, they were unofficial or officially paid coaches. And then the concept of sponsors, people who dropped my name when I wasn't in the room and mentioned opportunities or facilitated opportunities for me to get to where I am today. So those are the three key pivotal factors or characters in my story, in addition to me. But if I looked back on my journey, I would tell you that I went to pharmacy school with that intention of, okay, I'm going to figure out what drug interactions, how that works. How could something like that happen to someone like me? And how can I prevent that for others? And of course, I did learn more and more about that along the way. But I also learned that what was my true relationship with pharmacy and being a pharmacist? What was that vision for me? And so, as I shared, I learned early on that I wanted to be more of an academic or more of someone that was a little far removed from the patient care just because of my uncomfort or discomfort in the clinical setting or with patients personally. So knowing that and knowing what I liked and disliked, it was more of what I knew I did not want to do, and more of knowing that working in a pharmacy setting gave me allergic response. So those ruled out a lot of things. I was in pharmacy school pretty much realizing I'm allergic to my profession. What do I do? So, and here I am, I went to UNC. My parents, I love them. They helped me through school support, and I was an out-of-state student when I started. I became a resident later, but it was an expensive journey, right? To just think that, oh gosh, you're making a decision for your life that, you may not get to practice in. What are you going to do? But I will say one thread that has always helped me throughout my journey, even to today, when I'm doing the farthest possible thing from pharmacy, which is book publishing, I still do, and that's follow my heart. I use my brain, but I follow my heart. And so suffice it to say, my journey, when I started to realize in pharmacy school that, okay, in order to succeed, there are roadmaps that are already there, right? That, okay, if you're going to want to do some sort of residency or training or postgraduate training after, you need to be prepared for that. You need to do things such as find a mentor or research or be involved in student organizations, right? All the list of things that that are said that you should do. I looked at that list and I thought, okay, of all of these, what are things that I actually can do or do I want to do? And upon reflecting, I realized, there's opportunities if I have my close classmate friends in being involved in the student organizations, being an officer of these organizations. Once again, I looked at what I knew my strengths were. So I paused and I thought, okay, I may not be clinically advanced or I may not be really good at doing this direct patient care work, but I can still be in that setting and use my strengths that are photography, a passion I mentioned at the beginning. I can photograph. I'm good at writing. So what I did is I chose to be the webmaster of different student organizations when there were opportunities to apply, or the historian, someone to document with photos, or someone that is going to work with the advisors so that are other faculty to go and create reports about how did these student organizations do, so we could go and apply for awards or apply for grants, apply for things. So I started learning these skills of writing, or merging my skills of photographing and documenting things from that time during pharmacy school. And I had mentors to kind of say, oh, I would change that. I would edit that. Oh, you should include this. If you do this, this will look great. So those skills, again, no, I didn't even know it, but if you hear the way I'm describing it, those were underlying things that helped me later along my journey. Another thing that I did was really when I found a mentor or found a professor or found someone out there that was doing something that I really admired, I talked to them. I learned about what they did to get there. That's mentorship. They're going to tell you their journey. It doesn't mean it's going to be your journey. A mentor doesn't necessarily map it out like a coach would. A coach can help you literally tell you, here are the steps and here's what you can do to get this particular goal. The mentors were just happy to have someone really excited to hear or be interested in them. I found that along the way. And I've now served as a mentor for others. And I can really say that it does make you happy when there's someone sitting across from you, whether it's in a Zoom room or in real life, saying, that's so cool what you're doing, Janan. I want to hear about your journey. It's reflective, but it's also exciting because you can impact someone else's journey. So those are how mentors supported me. The sponsors were often mentors turned sponsors that learned about certain skills that I had. So the pivotal moment in which I really solidified this publishing path that I went into, in addition to the grant writing and documenting I did when I was a student pharmacist, I actually got a fellowship that was created for me by some professors that knew that I was a student that did well throughout pharmacy school, that really loved taking notes, that really found a way to bring to life the content. They hired me to be a fellow in educational technology research and development, a fellowship program they developed. I was the first person that did that at UNC.
Wow.
And they thought of me for the position, but it was something that has continued since. They needed a pharmacist or a PharmD that had experience in the curriculum to help them transform the curriculum, to be a little more interactive, or to be a little more online, to be a little more so that you're not just sitting in the classroom passively learning, so that you have more interactive, so you can apply the learning. That experience and the fellowship that I did, so I did a fellowship upon graduation. That was really, really interesting. I got to interface with more people that would end up serving as mentors in different capacities. I got to interact with people that were graphic designers, computer programmers, instructional designers. Again, really inspirational people to me that still serve as friends or colleagues in some capacity that I've been in touch with along my journey in different ways, just because I thought what they were doing is cool and I wanted to learn how I could learn and adapt and apply all of that to what I cared about or the degree I had in pharmacy. So all of these people gave me kind of a piece of the puzzle that I was building without realizing it of, wow, I have these tools that I'm adding to my toolkit, these puzzle pieces that are coming together to show that I have skills in writing that not most pharmacists work on. They have writing skills, all pharmacists. We had to write soap notes. We had to read a lot. I love to read. A lot of those are things that I had to practice. Those things coupled with, again, really good timing. When I finished that fellowship, once again, I actually was thinking that I would end up working and hopefully working in a school of pharmacy or that particular school where I did the fellowship. Unfortunately, they did not need a position like mine at the time. They had more fellows that could do the work. So I had to go back to the drawing board and I started applying for different positions where I could use the skills that I learned in my fellowship, maybe in a pharmaceutical industry. I even applied at pharmacy technician programs and said, hey, I could help make your curriculum. I know how to write, I know how to create educational technology solutions. Hire me. I was either too expensive or not the position that anyone needed. Again, it's easy to think these closed doors are the end of something. I kept trying. And I was at the right place in the right time when another mentor of mine from pharmacy school kind of acted as a sponsor and said, Janan, I know the perfect opportunity for you. I just came back from the American Pharmacists Association annual meeting. They're looking for a pharmacist, someone with a PharmD with experience in educational technology. I wish I was making this up. I'm not. I'm pretty sure, I don't know how many people in the world at that time had an actual fellowship program or experience. A lot of people have experience in ed tech, but the fact that I had just been finishing that, and it was just divine intervention that came on my lap.
Yeah,
came into my lap.
hallelujah.
Yes, hallelujah. I applied. The rest is history. I worked at the American Pharmacists Association for 7 years in the book publishing department. That's really where my journey, the little seeds that were planted before, but then they all blossomed when I was editing. I was working and I got promoted along the way. I started as someone that was the person that would do acquisition, meaning acquiring or meeting, finding authors that could write chapters or books that we were already going to write. Then, because I loved to read and I read all the books that APHA published because of my job, I started talking to my then mentor, that was the senior publisher at the time, talking to him about how do we get more books here? How can we get stuff about health equity or cultural competency or Spanish or different languages? We need more books like that. So suddenly I got promoted within my job at APHA a few years in, where I got to do more things and I learned about different aspects of publishing. And then that mentor of mine retired. And a few years later, I got that position. So that's where through my journey, and that was 7 years, and I published around 40 books over that time period. I didn't myself, but I was involved in the publication. That's those books up there.
Wow.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot about different subjects that I never imagined. I learned about interacting with people. I learned about printing and editing and paper and shipping and things that you don't think that a pharmacist needs to know, but you can learn from any experience and try to apply it, whether it's to what you're doing right now or try to make those transferable skills and take them somewhere else. Because it was actually around the pandemic, right, in 2020 and then 2021, when pandemic was still not over, that I started to do a lot of self-reflection on my life. Because I mentioned the colorful books that I have behind me are my children's. I had 3 young girls, pandemic time, non-traditional instruction. And I looked around, and this is where the holistic part of my journey, I start looking at my life holistically.
Right.
And it's this moment where I did an activity called the Wheel of Life or Circle of Life or Wheel of Life exercise, where you have to take what you think are the 8 or how many ever you like, but I like to say 8 most important areas of my life. For me, and I'd love to know what yours are, but for me, I would name the top few for you all. It would be my faith, my career, my family. This is in no particular order. My family life, my own health, my friendships, and my family. I think I've mentioned family twice, but maybe the inner family and then the extended family.
Right.
Those are of my top. Community. And I'm going to ask you about yours, but I will just say I reviewed and I felt that I was doing perfectly on many of the areas. But when I really was honest with myself and I looked at my health, and then I divided my health because I could not give myself a good score on my health. And I thought maybe if I divide health into sleep and into, my diet and then into my exercise, maybe that'll be better. No, it was worse because my scores were even lower when I divided it into those 3. I was taking care of everything else the world, my work, the books, and all of that. But for myself, I was not. I was eating junk food because it was the only thing I could grab between taking care. But I was cooking my kids the organic, I was giving them everything. We were going to Whole Foods. I was just eating the stuff, the candy bars that they have, just to make it through to the next thing. And I'm not even a retail pharmacist, right? I'm not talking about, but I felt those signs and symptoms of burnout, not to blame my career or my job. I blame myself. I just wasn't paying attention. Life was happening and I wasn't paying attention. So that was my big aha moment. But I'd love to pause and know more about you and what areas do you reflect on when you do that exercise and activity?
Yeah, it's funny. That was the first thing I learned when I trained as a health coach was that wheel of life exercise. And
Yes.
yeah, to be honest, there's lots of those activities out there and they have different areas to focus on and integrate. And you basically would draw it out on a piece of paper here and kind of show the audience. So you would draw the 8 things or so, or some people have more or less, and then you would kind of rate where it is out of 10, and 10 would be the circle. And then you would just kind of connect it. And sometimes it looks like this. So you'll see, okay, this small area is where there's a problem because I'm not anywhere near, that top 10. So as you were speaking, I was actually reflecting on what my 8 are, and they're pretty similar to what you mentioned. So mine are health, family, spirit, community, purpose, career, creativity, and finances. So yeah, they're not in any particular order either, but those are pretty important to me. And the first thing I thought of was actually purpose. So, so yeah, I think everybody would really benefit if you want to pause this podcast right now or do this, if you're driving or something like this, pause it later and really understand what's important to you, list your 8 priorities, or, if you want to put in more or less, that's up to you, and create your own wheel of life and understand which area needs to be nourished a little bit more, which area is your strength, because we were talking about strengths before. So you want to lean into those strengths, but then you also want to understand what's missing. And these 8 things, like we said, could be different for you. So it's whatever you deem important.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you I'm glad we're sharing this with everyone. It remains being one of the most helpful exercises for me to just check in with myself, because it's so easy when we hyper focus on our goals, because we have them and we should. And a lot of times it's career related, or we're trying to get to this one thing that you can forget. And when you hyper focus, or it's not even about hyper focusing, we're balancing a lot. 8 things are a lot of things to keep track of. And this exercise is one I personally, because I just turned to my side and I found one, beside me that I try to be very honest when I reflect. And it's actually okay if you have a score that's low, right? When you have that jagged score, because it sometimes tells you, okay, the things that are 10 out of 10, maybe you don't need to pay attention to that for a little while. Like you can scale back a little because there's only so much energy and time we have. Maybe some of that energy we're putting towards our friends, or putting towards, I love that you had creativity for one of them. Maybe you have a really low creativity spell, but you're really doing well in some other area. It can deserve some, shifting and balancing or rebalancing to reflect. So I love that. So thanks for allowing us to share that with everyone.
Yeah, your circle looks a lot neater.
No. No. Yeah. I had a plate or something to trace before.
Yeah, but I love what you're saying about, there's also different seasons of life. So sometimes it's okay to recognize that, okay, at this point in my life, my family, or my relationship with my partner or my finances, maybe this is what I'm really focused on right now. And it's okay for me to take a little slack in the other areas that are already doing well and really hyper focus on these things, because this what's most important right now. And these priorities will change, which is why it's good to do this exercise often, like you were saying,
Yes.
and kind of just check in, okay, well, what needs nourishing now, and supporting those areas. And, when you were saying about, constantly going into one area or another area, it's not about like judging yourself.
No.
And once you hone in, like, okay, my health is suffering, you could break that up into other areas, like time in nature,
Yes.
the food that you eat, like you said, the sleep and the exercise, like that has a whole lot of facets just in that one category. So you can just, get as creative and dive as deep as you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was this reflection that exactly caused me when I realized I was so low in my own health. I was pre-diabetic. I was avoiding going to the doctor because I knew. I was avoiding looking in mirrors because I knew. I was wearing elastic clothes because I knew. And again, it's obvious. I knew what happened. I knew why it happened. I wasn't taking care. I wasn't mindful of what I was eating and doing because I was focused on other areas. I didn't beat myself up about it, but I did realize also that I couldn't do it alone at that time. So I hired a health coach. I actually did. I hired a health coach to help me. I hired uh I went, and that's actually how I started. I also work for a company called the Happy Farm D, which does career counseling or career coaching for people. I was almost searching for career guidance myself, but I ended up happening up to find them, and they said, "Wow, Janan, how many pharmacists can say that they've published all of these books? It's kind of rare. So if you want to rebalance your life and you want more balance and focus, why don't you try to become a coach? That's a way you'll have some income, and then maybe you can see where else you want to work if that's not the career you want. What's your goal? What is your real goal?" And I realized for the first time I had not paused to think of my goal. I thought I was just going to work somewhere forever because that's what you're supposed to do. And that's the point of reflecting. We don't reflect enough. I've realized I did not. I never reflected enough. And it's been in those moments of peace where I find clarity of what are my visions? What is the vision that I have? What's my mission? How do I get there? And it can be very overwhelming, but a motto that I like to use is progress over perfection. So once again, looking at that wheel, if I were to do it right now again, and I recognize, oh goodness, I have not been spending time, quality time with my spouse is one of them. And he's a pharmacist. He works from home. He's in like a few doors down from me right now. We technically should see each other all the time. We live in the same house, but with 3 young kids, his schedule and mine, I could honestly say that that is the lowest right now. I could either say, okay, I'm going to figure it out and change it all, and we're going to see each other all the time. That's extreme. No one wants that. I don't want that. My husband doesn't want that.
You're going to want to separate in the rooms again pretty soon.
Pretty soon. No, we can get along, but trying to go a mistake we often make, or if I looked at my health and said, I'm at a 0, I got a health coach, and I'm gonna do it, figure it out all out in 1 month. That's extreme, right? And we often try to do that. We rate ourselves and we beat ourselves up, or we don't beat ourselves up. We just say, okay, I want to really improve this. So then the hyper focus goes on that low area, and we have these unrealistic expectations. And that often leads to failure too, right? Because you put all this effort and hope and expectation. So that's where the progress over perfection, what I've learned in everything and how I've been able to get to where I am today in balancing and publishing books and creating my own company, is really this. When I do look back, and we're going to keep talking about that wheel, if, for example, today I said my spouse area is low, it's low on the scale, what's one thing I can do? Just one small thing, right? One small amount of progress I can make that can make this better for the entire week. Not saying, extreme, but what's one small change I can make? And sometimes I have to say, if I'm going to make that one change, what do I have to, in something else I'm doing? Because, my plate is full. Our plates are full. Our schedules are packed. Our meetings go from one to another often, right? In this busy life we lead. kids and picking them up and all the things that we do, all the things we balance. So I have to trade something off in order to make that one bit of progress. And it could be from my own chunk, or it could be from somewhere else, or it could be seeing where I'm wasting time. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's a thing that I'm doing that's not serving me in any way.
Yeah.
And taking from that and saying, okay, if I just complained less about my spouse, I'm kidding. We're good. We're good. But let's just say, instead of complaining and having an argument, let's spend that time having a day date together and seeing each other, chatting over some coffee. So yeah, that's been my real holistic approach to life, is really taking a look at it from this perspective of, being metacognitive, like thinking about the way we think, thinking about what normal is for me. When I often go into spaces, they say, I've heard for pharmacists, you're not a pharmacist, you're publishing. And again, as you heard me kind of defend, no, I still very much find myself a pharmacist. And those that practice holistic medicine as well, or holistic pharmacy, who are saying, look, we're trained and we know about pharmacy. My real prescription for health that my health coach helped me stay on track was being mindful of what I was eating. And all I did was cut out the processed stuff. That's all I promised. It was just one promise. I made it easy. One of my favorite books is Atomic Habits, if you've read,
Yeah.
by James Clear. And I made it really easy. It was just one rule that I had to follow. And believe it or not, I went from an A1C of 5.8 to an A1C of less than 5 in a year. It took a year. I didn't measure it. I mean, it was when I knew I was pre-diabetic, and then I waited a year. I lost weight just because I was mindful and I knew I had a plan for what I was going to eat. Nothing went in my mouth for a year. I stuck to this one rule. Nothing processed went into my mouth. And that, coupled with cutting on slowly, I didn't do all this at once, but I also cut out on refined sugars and all of those things. I transformed, but I didn't add exercise. I couldn't afford to add that to my very full plate of pandemic children and all of that. But the results that I saw from just that mindful change and actually seeing myself melt away, and it's not about the weight, it was about the A1C, about my health that I regained, my sleep, that I was able to sleep better because I was eating good foods. All of that transformed to make me a better version of myself. So the decisions that I made, the choices that I made, and the goals and the vision I had for myself of, yes, one day I want to start my own publishing company. I started my own publishing company. I'm speaking to you today. It's going to be the 1-year anniversary of my publishing company. And we've been publishing several books, and we have more coming out every month. It's a dream come true. And I want to say that anyone can do it. If you just look at it, your progress over perfection. Don't perfect. We stop ourselves sometimes when we try to make it perfect before we launch anything or do anything. No, make it easy. Follow your heart, use your brain, and you can do it too.
Wow. Well, I really want to reflect back to you that this is just words of wisdom pouring down right now.
No.
Because really life can be simple, like you're saying, but we make it so complicated. And honestly, the odds are stacked against us because, everybody around us makes things complicated. And so we feel like we also need to do that, and we need to keep up with the Joneses. And, instead of thinking about our own wheel, we're like, well, how can I make my wheel look better than, his or her wheel?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just, extraneous. And there really is an art to keeping it simple, because it's not easy. Even though it's simple, it's not necessarily easy because, there's all this pressure from the outside. And even cutting out processed foods, I have to say, like, that sounds like, okay, it's just one rule, but it is like complicated in every shopping choice, and, making everything from scratch versus buying something, ready-made and packaged. Like, there's a lot that goes into that one rule. So I have to applaud you on that.
Yes. And again, you're right. I just nonchalantly dropped that rule. It was a little bit intentional to say that to make anything, sorry if my audio has changed by any means, but to make something like that work, I had to take a lot more time than I was doing before, time that you were mentioning before, to cook or to purchase. Where am I buying things from? I had a rule of how many ingredients could be in something. That was part of the rule of not processed. But yeah, to get back to the basics took a lot of time, but that actually, believe it or not, because on my wheel was time with my daughters and time with my spouse, right? I integrated that. I found a way to make that work together so that if we were going to do this, it was a family journey. They were already eating the organic, all that stuff that I was doing for them, but it was adding me and my spouse and being able to do it as a family, teaching them about foods and choices and going, even though this was, during the pandemic that I was making those choices, it was easier in a way because we didn't have all that outside noise, right? The pandemic for some was this time of reflection. For some, it was a time when they were by themselves for the first time and seeing how much of an outside influence we're letting in. And although we still talk about COVID, it's not over. I think that this is the time that if anyone's listening to this, or we buy all these self-help books and we read all these things about productivity. But you're right, the simplest way, it's the action that you take. Don't read a ton. Pick one thing. Pick one book that you like. And we both like Atomic Habits for one.
Yeah.
If New Habits are something that you're trying to do, because it teaches you both how to create good habits and get rid of bad ones too, because we need to do both. And making things simple like that, which it's not simple, it takes time, it takes patience, but being very mindful about your decisions and not looking at anyone else's. I loved how you said that. Don't compare your wheel to anyone else and don't put things on your wheel that anyone else tells you to. It's your choice. What do you find important in your life? And I found that once I'm really set, so now I don't have to think that hard about my food choices. It's not as hard for me to cook. We have a way, we have a method. My kids are older now, right? I have 2 years ago, they were all little. The youngest one was 1 years old, and now she's 3. She helps in the kitchen. She knows what to order. And
Wow.
because again, we are children, and who we are, we reflect what we see, we reflect who's around us. So be mindful also of who you're comparing yourself to or who you're letting in your circle. If we keep talking about circles today, who is in your wheel, who are around you? Hopefully they're people you look up to and not people that drag you down. I hate to say that, but you've probably heard this quote or saying before that when you're really making transformational change for yourself, you can lose people, friends that you used to have. But the other thing that I really want, another favorite quote, since we're talking about quotes, that I want to leave you with is, of course, if you have other questions, I'm happy to answer. But a quote that I love is by Mark Twain, talking about the 2 most important days of your life. Have you heard that one?
I think
Know
I
what they
did.
are? So the 2 most important days are the day you're born, and the second is the day you find out why.
Yeah, I did hear that.
The day you find out why, your purpose. Because at the core of your wheel, at the core of what we're doing, whatever degree you had, whatever we're floating through life doing, hopefully it's towards something that you're passionate about. Your purpose, as you said, where this podcast is all about that. Every episode I've learned, the guests that you've had, they really share how they're living their purpose now. And I'm glad to join the ranks to say that right now, I do feel like Global Bookshelves International, my publishing company, is this combination of what I love to do, reading and editing, and I'm good at doing it too. It's also what I think the world needs. We need more books that reflect the world, which is diverse, which needs to be just and equitable, and it needs to be inclusive and promote belonging. Those are what each of the books that I help publish stand for. And just this combination of figuring out your life purpose, your ikigai, or there's so many words for this concept. As Mark Twain says, it's important to know when you're born. It's important to find out why. And then the addendum I'll add is it's important to live that, right? So all the books that you read them, learn about them. Knowledge is power, but knowledge is potential power. You have to implement it in as simple of a way as you can, taking one step, and then the rest will follow.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you're saying. And we definitely have read some of the same books because I'm picking up on some of the concepts. And what you're really saying is like more, we think more is better, right? Like more books, more knowledge. But like you said, we have to take the time and space for integration and application. And like your journey in pharmacy and making the interactive part of it help students learn and experience for themselves, like our appies and our ippies, right? To let us know, okay, maybe this is not the right setting because I have an allergy to my workspace, right? You have to take those actions. You have to dive into the experience and you have to do what those books are telling you to do, what your coaches are telling you to do. Otherwise, you will always live in theory, right? But when we are in real life, we have to understand that only our actions will allow us to know and feel and experience any changes.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Exactly. You're exactly right.
Yeah. And I want to also reflect that our conversation so far really cemented the importance of relationships in general and networking and mentorships and coaching and all kinds of relationships, spouses and family. And the world really is, and almost everybody's wheel of life, I would imagine, really values relationships and business. Having a business or doing anything in life really requires relationships and relies on human interaction and relationships in some sort of way or shape or form.
Yes.
So that's what I'm also trying to do with this podcast is really, that is my way of building relationships and networking and supporting and uplifting, like I was mentioning. So I think I kind of caught that fact of life and that value later on in life. And I don't think I really knew when I was like going to school or going to college or even after college, how important and integral this is. But it really is the backbone, I think, of our mission and our purpose and our business and, so many things in life. So I think your journey is definitely reflective of the fact that you need to establish that network. You need to tell people what you're doing, tell people what you're interested in, showcase that so that you have these opportunities in front of you when people know and recognize you for those things that you're passionate about.
Yes, even if it feels like you're the fish swimming the other way when a school of fish is going one way, right? We're told we need to get this residency or you need to get that job, that promotion, buy that house, have that car. That's what they say, whoever they is. If we keep following that and not recognizing what we internally need or what we want, what we hope for, what our individual goals are, you're going to miss that. And if you follow yourself, you're that one swimming the wrong way. You're the one that everyone sees. You are the one that's noticed. You are standing out when you're following that path. It's lonely, I will admit, it can be. But if you've created and nurtures those relationships that you were talking about, it's not that lonely because people knew you along that way, right? I still can reach back out to the mentors, to the sponsors, to the coaches, because they've been a part of my journey. And now you have too, just through this conversation, because again, the way you reached out to me, I love that. I love that we met through your financial pharmacist, which is really interesting as well. And I love the work they're doing. And it is a small community we have. We're pharmacists, and pharmacists can be so I'm including myself, can be so, we look within, or we're very independent when we need to be. But then we can compare ourselves when we shouldn't. So maybe flipping that a little bit, being okay with allowing yourself to be your own measure. And then when you're comparing, it's not about comparing, it's interacting, it's connecting, not comparing.
Yeah, I love that. And I love keeping that circle strong. And I was interviewed by Alex Barker in the past too, and I have to have him on
Yeah.
the show too. So you just reminded
Yes.
me of that.
Yes. Yes. He'd be a wonderful guest. He's taught me so much of all that I know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just have like 2 minutes left, I would love to throw some rapid fire at
Oh,
you.
yes. I'm ready. I'm ready. Quick, go ahead.
All right. So thank you so much already for all the advice you've given, because something I ask is for advice for our listeners. And I think there's plenty already in here. So I just want to know, like, what's one step that you took that you think allowed you to have this business and allowed you to feel satisfied with your work?
Allowing myself to fail. I knew that this was going to be tough. And I would say the rapid answer is be okay with failures, and then don't even call them failures. Closed doors just allow you to be redirected to something else.
Love that. What's one thing that you feel like is integral to your self-care routine?
Reading, reading and reflecting on what I'm reading. Very important for me.
Yeah, the second integration part is so important. What is your favorite unprocessed homemade food?
I love making biryani, but I do it with, so that's an Indian Bengali dish, but I make it with cauliflower rice
Ooh.
and chicken. So it's very non-traditionally made, just like I am. But it's my favorite thing to make. My kids like it too, and they think it's real biryani. So
Amazing. Yeah, I think another theme is like experimentation and having fun, just mixing things up and
yes,
going a little beyond tradition.
yes.
Love it. Well, Janan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on. Please tell the listeners how they could learn more about you, your publishing company. How can they see, what books are out there and connect with you?
Yes, you can find me. I'm the only Janan Sarwar. So my name is here below. I'm the only Janan Sarwar. You can find me on LinkedIn as well as globalbookshelves.com and janansarwar.com. Globalbookshelves.com will share all the information about our upcoming books. We have children's books, as I mentioned, memoirs, and books that are being published by fellow pharmacists. So if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out. I love to help other pharmacists in any way I can and support them if they've already written a book as well.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I will put all that information in the show notes, and I really do hope that our listeners will check it out. I will certainly be following your work, and thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. It was very fun. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too.
Thank you for tuning in to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed creating it. If you learned something new from it, I'd love if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with a friend who might love it too. You can find me on any of the podcast and social media platforms by looking up Holistic Pharmacist or Dr. Marina Buksov. Thank you for your support and see you next time.